All right, we might get started. So hi everyone and welcome to our webinar today, the end of financial year tips for HR and payroll. My name is Brigid Daly and I'm a customer success manager here at Employment Hero. I'm also joined today by Rebecca Allen, one of our CX learning and education specialists. Rebecca?
Morning. Thanks, Bridget. Morning, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Just a little bit of housekeeping. As this is a live Q&A session, we have allocated time at the end of the webinar for any of your questions. Please don't hesitate to begin typing your questions in the box down the bottom of your Zoom screens and shown via the red arrow on screen. What we'll do is when we get to the later half of the session, we'll get to as many of these as we can. I'd also like to note that today's session is being recorded and it will be made available as an on-demand webinar post the event today. Just a quick disclaimer, the views here are our views and provided in good faith. We don't accept liability for any of our views. We do recommend that you seek expert advice if you feel that you need it. So today's agenda, we're going to go through some payroll tips, so reconciling employee and business data, creating and lodging your finalization event, important information and key dates. Then we'll switch over to talking through some HR tips, so some compliance obligations, workplace culture and goals, general HR and workforce planning. And then we want to talk through some new features that have become available in the last 12 months in the Employment Hero platform. We'll then touch on how you can get support and open up our Q&A. So I'm just going to hand over to Beck now to take us through payroll tips.
Thank you so much, Bridget. So today we'll be going through a number of payroll tips to set you up for success throughout the end of financial year process. Any reports and resources that we discuss will pertain to Employment Hero payroll. However, the basic premise will be similar if you are currently using another payroll system. So before creating and lodging a finalization event, there are a few steps that we recommend taking. The first of which is reconciling your employee and business data. So there's a few steps and a few key items that we recommend reviewing and reconciling. So the first of which is email addresses. These are important for your employees because you will be sending notifications to let them know that the end of year process has been finalized and that their income statements will be tax ready in their MyGov portal. Number two is tax file numbers. If an employee has not provided you with their tax file number on commencement of employment, the system will generate a special purpose tax file number, for example, 1111111. You can lodge STP events and you can finalize your end of financial year process with those generic tax file numbers. However, this can obviously cause issues for employees if the earnings are not being correctly allocated to them. So we do recommend that before you process that you make sure that you've got the correct tax file number listed. Number three is confirming that residential addresses are correct. That's important because it can cause a validation issue with the end of financial year, the finalization process. Number four is to review the single touch payroll income type, for example, closely held payees, working holiday makers, and things like that. So if you have working holiday makers as a part of your workforce, it is essential that this setting is correct and that the home country as per the employee's visa is selected, because working holiday makers are taxed differently and incorrect classification may affect their tax return. The single touch payroll field can also be used to view an employee's closely held status or to check for other STP income types. So this is useful for businesses that have closely held employees reported on a quarterly basis and therefore will need to lodge a separate finalization event. Also keep an eye out if you have any foreign employees and make sure that they are set up correctly as per the tax declaration options in the payroll system. This is important because you will need to report foreign tax paid as a part of the finalization event. So that's step one. Step two is to review the business settings. So there's a couple of key settings that we recommend reviewing in your payroll platform. You want to confirm that your ATO settings are correct. For example, are you lodging as the employer, or is a tax or BAS agent lodging on your behalf? And is your system set up in accordance with those options? If your business is fringe benefit tax exempt, you'll need to ensure that this is set to yes in the ATO settings. The system does default. So the Employment Hero payroll system does default to no. So if you are FBT exempt, you need to make sure that you change that to yes. If you have employing entities set up, you'll also need to review the settings for these individually, because they will have their own FBT exemption, and they'll also have their own STP settings as well. Now, number 4 is to review the automatic super update settings. Employment Hero Payroll will automatically update the super guarantee rate on the 1st of July, as long as you've configured a few settings correctly. We have detailed instructions on how to do this, which we will include in the resources at the end of this session. There are a couple of places that you'll need to check to ensure that super will automatically update for you. You'll want to review your pay category classifications and your deduction category classifications as well. So since the introduction of STP phase 2, and along with that, the disaggregation of earnings, there are a number of new pay and deduction category classifications. Employment Hero Payroll automatically updated this for our system categories with the introduction of STP phase 2. However, if you are adding any new pay or deduction categories, or if you have customized anything, you will need to ensure that the classification settings meet the ATO's new requirements. We'll also include the instructions on how to configure these in Employment Hero Payroll in the resources at the end of this session. And the last 2 steps here are to ensure that you have finalized all of your pay runs for the financial year, and that you have lodged the corresponding STP events. So just keep note, though, when you are reviewing this, that the financial year that the data is allocated to is based off of the paid date of the pay run and not the pay period. So just keep that in mind. So once we've reviewed our business settings, we can go along to step 3, which is to complete a reconciliation of our year-to-date data. So what we want to do in this case is reconcile the payroll year-to-date data against what has been lodged via single touch payroll. Now, the good news is that Employment Hero Payroll does a lot of this work for you. So when you create any STP event, you can download the year-to-date Excel workbook, and you can review the STP year-to-date, itemized gross, ETP, any ETP data for the financial year, and the payroll year-to-date figures. The workbook will have a final tab. So there are 5 tabs in the Excel year-to-date workbook. The final tab is the variance. So this will highlight if there are any variances or discrepancies in the data. We have linked an article in the handout that we'll send you at the end of the session as well, which explains what to do if you find a variance. So we recommend completing the reconciliation via an update event. There are a couple of reasons why we recommend this. You can review the variance tab, which will compare the STP year-to-date and the payroll year-to-date data for you. And also in the update event is where you would add any reportable fringe benefit amounts for previously terminated employees. Once the variance has been removed and you've resolved any discrepancies and you have a variance now of 0, as you can see on the screen, that's perfect. What that means is that your year-to-date data is all correct, and then we recommend lodging that update event once you've completed the reconciliation and you're happy with all of your figures. So that's steps 1 through to 3. We, like I said, we recommend reviewing your employee data, your business data, and then completing the reconciliation. So those are the first 3 steps. And then the final step is, once you're happy with how all of your year-to-date data is looking, you don't have any discrepancies, you can then go ahead and finalize. So when you are creating the finalization event in Employment Hero Payroll, we do have a wizard that will step you through the process. So when you go to create the event, or you go to the, you press the button that says Start Finalization Process, it will ask you to choose the pay schedule that you're wanting to lodge for. If you have less than 2,000 employees, you can finalize all of your pay schedules at the same time, and you only need to lodge one finalization event. If you do have more than 2,000 employees, you will need to complete a separate finalization event for each of those pay schedules. If you are reporting any closely held employees on a quarterly basis, you will also need to complete a separate finalization event for these employees. And when you click start finalization process, you can see the differentiation between your arm's length employees, and it will say there's a separate section to lodge closely held payees. So the end of financial year wizard will walk you through all of the necessary steps to complete the finalization event. So the first page that will appear after creating the event is where you can confirm that your payroll data is correct. In this case, because we recommend reconciling your year-to-date data through the update event before finalizing, you shouldn't have any discrepancies. And at this point, this will just be a little checklist to make sure that everything is correct. So the second step, so once you have confirmed that all of your employee data is correct for your active employees, the next step is then to enter any reportable fringe benefit amounts for your active employees. So just keeping in mind that we've added reportable fringe benefit amounts for terminated employees in the update event that we've just done. So in this case, we want to enter grossed up year-to-date totals only. So with the introduction of STP phase 2, we no longer have to report the fringe benefit tax amounts separately for each category. It's just one lump sum amount, grossed up year-to-date total. And just as a reminder, if you are using Employment Hero Payroll to process your STP events, just keep in mind that the FBT amounts are overridden by another event. So if you do need to amend the finalization event, you will need to add reportable fringe benefit tax again. If you are currently using another payroll platform, it will be best to double check with them where they would like for you to enter those figures. If you don't have any fringe benefit tax amounts to report, that's perfectly fine. You can leave everything as 0 and then just move to the next step. So the third step in the process will only appear if you have employees who are assigned as foreign employees in the tax declaration settings. So if you don't have any foreign employees, what will happen is you'll enter your reportable fringe benefit amounts, and then the system will take you to the next step, which is to lodge the finalization event. If you do have foreign employees, you will be asked to enter any foreign tax payable figures. And if you do have a foreign employee, you have to enter an amount before you can proceed. The system won't let you proceed without entering any figures. So those are the 3 steps that will appear in the wizard as you proceed through the finalization process. So once the finalization event has been lodged successfully, you will be able to send the notifications to your employees to advise that their income statements are now tax ready. And that's done once the finalization event has been successfully lodged. You'll see a success status, and then you can go ahead and go into the actions button and send notifications. So there are a couple of key dates to keep in mind with the end of financial year process and the introduction of the next financial year and some changes that are being made. So as of the 1st of July 2023, super guarantee rates will be increasing to 11%. The SG max contribution base will also be increasing to $62,270 per quarter. The ETP cap amount will be increasing to $235,000, and the tax-free base amount for ERP or genuine redundancy is going to be increasing to $11,985, plus an additional $5,994 for each completed year of service. Now, keep an eye out on the ATO tax tables to remain up to date with any changes. At this stage, we've not seen any indication that the tax tables will be changing for the next financial year. However, if they do, we will update the Employment Hero payroll system accordingly. So the same goes for all of the other changes to these caps and figures. We will organise for those to be updated as of the 1st of July. There is a 5.75% increase to minimum wage. Now, the updates of the minimum wage increases in our inbuilt awards will be published on the 1st of July by the end of the day. So our team will work through the list of system built awards accordingly. And if you're using Employment Hero Payroll, once the award is updated, you'll see a notification on the dashboard, and then you can go ahead and install the updates. If you're not currently using Employment Hero Payroll, that's definitely something to consider if you would like to have a system that uses or that has inbuilt award interpretations for you. We definitely have a lot of those set up. We currently have about 53, I believe, inbuilt awards. So we also, on the 14th of July, finalization declarations are due for all of your arm's length or your standard non-closely held employees. The finalization process will electronically submit that finalization declaration for you. So as you work your way through the end of financial year wizard, the last step will be the declaration where you tick the box and then go ahead and lodge. 28th of July, we've got the April to June super quarter due. On the 30th of September, if you've got both closely held payees and arm's length employees, your finalization declaration for your closely held payees will be due by the 30th of September. If you only have closely held payees and you don't have any arm's length employees, you have until the due date of the closely held payees individual income tax return to make a finalization declaration for that closely held payee. And then last but not least, 28th of October, we have the July to September super quarter due. So that is our payroll tips for the day. As I said, we'll be sending through all of the instructions that I mentioned in the resources after the session. And I'll be handing over to Brigid to walk us through the HR tips.
Thanks, Beck. Just a reminder to everybody as we go, you are welcome to start typing in questions into our Q&A box now, and Beck and I can either start typing out answers, or when we get to the Q&A part towards the end of the webinar, we can read them out and answer them there. So moving on to some HR tips for the end of financial year. So first and foremost, it is important to note that end of financial year is largely handled within your payroll software and within that department. However, there are several areas we should consider with regards to HR surrounding our obligations regarding regulation and compliance. This is a great time to remind staff members to update their tax declaration in case anything may be changing for them next year, such as no longer having a student or help debt. Remember to review Fair Work regulations for any changes, reviewing the National Employment Standards or the NES, and if you use an award, making sure that you read through any changes that may be applying there. This is also a great time of year to hit reset and ensure your systems are the most up to date with both ATO and Fair Work requirements. This is also a great time to revisit your workplace culture and goals. So reviewing your goals or performance reviews, CPI or pay increases that may be non-mandated, reviewing your company values, assessing your culture through feedback and employee happiness surveys, reflect on HR and people management goals, and measure your company-wide alignment of goals. This is also a great time to review your HRIS system to see what areas you could be utilising further. It's also a good time to do general HR and workforce planning for the financial year ahead. So prepare for upcoming performance reviews, perform an analysis of your employee engagement, happiness and turnover, review your current and existing employee disputes, review performance management issues, assess and evaluate your onboarding, retention and recruitment strategies, identify and plan for any new roles in the upcoming financial year, consider candidates for internal promotions, and let your team know what they can claim on tax if they've been working from home. We'd just like to also take a moment to highlight some new features that have come out in the last 12 months with Employment Hero. So we have 360 reviews now, which is where you can actually do your reviews and get a full view of your employee's performance cycle. We have updated and enhanced quite a few areas as well. So our goals are now connected and accessible with your performance review feature. One-to-ones have new AI features to assist you and or your team members in filling these out. This feature is now also available within our Swag app. Recruitment syncs into Calendly, Outlook calendar. You can talk with candidates straight from and start a talent pipeline, among other things. Our recruitment side of our platform is really taking off, and it is a fantastic time to get involved with that and let us know what you're liking and where we need to develop that further. We also have several AI enhancements through our company feed, recognition, and recruitment areas. We've also been enhancing our safety feature in regards to reporting and compliance areas. So these are just a few areas that we've recently updated, enhanced, or added into our platform.
Thanks, Brigid. And last but not least, if you are looking for support from Employment Hero during the end of financial year process, there will be a dedicated support team working through support tickets only. So we recommend a support ticket from within the platform itself by selecting the support button that is visible on the bottom right. So the support button is available for owners and admins of both the HR and payroll platforms. And those questions will go straight through to our dedicated support team. The phone calls, any phone calls that are made to Employment Hero during the end of financial year process will be going through to our BAU team, who are equipped to handle our non-EOFY questions. So if you do happen to call, they will create a ticket for you and send you through to our dedicated team, who will then contact you through the support ticket specifically. So just make sure you hit that support button on the bottom right of the platform and you will be able to get through to the EOFY support team.
Perfect. So we are just going to open up to questions now. So you can start typing those into the Q&A, and Beck and I will start answering those. We're just going to launch a poll also, if you could fill that out, just to let us know whether or not you already use Employment HR or Payroll, whether you use both of our platforms, or whether you're not using Employment Hero at all and you've come today to learn a little bit more about our platforms. So just while we wait for you to fill out that poll, we do have a few questions in our Q&A. Beck, I might hand over to you to look at Natalie's one, which is, should you terminate employees not already terminated prior to running end of year, in addition to checking addresses and emails, etc.?
Yeah, thanks, Brigid. So yes, I would recommend, if you have employees that have been terminated throughout the financial year, that you'll need to make sure that you've terminated those employees in both platforms. So if you're using Employment Hero HR and a different payroll software, or if you're using Employment Hero HR and Employment Hero Payroll, we do recommend having those employees terminated. And in addition to that, you'll need to include the termination reason and the termination date. So all of that will need to be recorded through Single Touch Payroll. And what that means is that at the point of termination, those employees will be marked as final for STP, and their income statements will be generated at that point. So those employees who were terminated prior to the finalization event won't actually be included in the finalization event, but they will be automatically marked as final in their last lodgement.
Thanks, Beck. We've actually got another one following along from a similar vein, which is, what are common reasons that pay categories for having a variance in STP finalization events?
Yeah, perfect. So one of the most common reasons for a variance in the finalization event is if the pay categories or deduction categories have not been classified correctly. So an example of this is with the introduction of STP phase 2, pre-tax deductions only now have 2 options. The 2 options are salary sacrifice superannuation or salary sacrifice other employee benefits. So in the payroll system, and this is specific to Employment Hero payroll, in our system, if we have any pre-tax deduction that is classified as default, it will be put into a separate bucket, and in the update event or the finalization event in the Excel year-to-date spreadsheet, they'll be in a separate column that will say not classified because they're not classified correctly, and they won't be counted in the STP year-to-date data. So what that means is that you'll potentially then have a variance where it's saying that these figures haven't been reported when they actually have, they've just been reported incorrectly. So I actually think this might follow up to another question that I can see that says, if you find year-to-date variances, how do you fix these? So what I might do is I'm going to jump into the payroll platform and I can show you a couple of places to look. So Brigid, if you want to just hand over to me.
I was going to say, you're going to need me to hand over to you.
Yes, please.
All right. Go for it, Beck.
There we go. Okay, we can see the payroll platform. Yep. Sorry, Brigid, can you just double check that where you can see my screen?
I can indeed. Yep.
Beautiful. Thank you. Okay, so we're in the Employment Hero payroll platform. So for those of you who have not used it, this is what it looks like. And for those of you who are currently using Employment Hero payroll, this probably looks pretty familiar. So there's a couple of places that you can view the variance information. So what we'll do, we'll scroll down and we'll go into reports. And then under ATO reporting, we have our single touch payroll. So this is where we can review pay events and submit update events to the ATO. So we'll go in, the system will default to the current financial year. If for any reason you needed to go back, you can go back to a previous financial year, and you also have the option to filter to pay schedules. I'm just going to leave it unfiltered and display all of my year-to-date data. So you can see here, I've got a couple of pay events that have been processed successfully. I've done an update event here for my fortnightly pay schedule, and I have created a draft update event, for my weekly pay schedule to do my reconciliation. So if I go into the event, I think this might not be a great example because I have a feeling this one's got no discrepancies, but we'll pretend like it does. So I've got my year-to-date data of all of my employees. I can see their income type, total reportable gross figures, allowances, bonuses, super, and tax withheld. If I go download and open the Excel year-to-date spreadsheet, this is where we can review all of the year-to-date data that has been lodged. So I've got my STP year-to-date tab with all of my employees' details. I can see their total reportable gross, and this gives me a breakdown very similar to what you'd see in something like the detailed activity report or the gross to net report. I can then see the itemized gross. So this is the page where you can see all of the itemized gross income amounts based on the classification of the pay category and the deduction category. So I can see all of my different leave types. If I scroll through, I can see all of my different allowance types. I can then go through, see all of my different lump sum options. I can see all of the ETP codes. I've got all of my super and employee contributions. So I can see everything itemized here. ETP will give me any ETP figures for the financial year, and the payroll year to date will give me all of the information that has been processed in finalized pay runs throughout the financial year. Again, keeping in mind that this is picking up the financial year based on the paid date as opposed to the pay period of the pay runs. So I've got all of my details here. I can see my gross earnings, my pre-tax deductions, any taxable earnings, PAYG, etc. The last page is going to give me the variance if there is any. So in this case, I can see that I have my STP year-to-date figures, and this is giving me reportable gross minus the salary sacrifice, minus lump sum D, and minus tax-free allowances. So this is in line with how the ATO is now displaying the income statements and how they're completing the calculations. And that gives me my total STP figure. I can then see my taxable earnings as per my payroll year-to-date data. And in this case, I don't have a variance. But if I go back, what I'd like to show you, actually, let me just reopen that. I'll show you one thing before we move forward. If any of the pay or deduction categories are incorrectly classified, where you'll see that is, let's just say, for example, there was a variance. If we're in the STP year-to-date tab, if I go all the way across, this section here that says pre-tax deductions not classified, if any of your pre-tax deductions are classified as default or as earnings effectively, it's not going to be reported correctly. They need to be salary sacrifice super or salary sacrifice other employee benefits are the only two options as per STP phase 2. The data will be in here, and then that will give you an indication as to the amount and which employee is affecting the variance report. Another section here is not reported. So this will give you the total earnings paid using pay categories with the payment classification exclude from payment summary or income statement. So those figures will be reported here as well. If I go out of here and let's go into our reports, actually we'll go into our dashboard and to payroll settings. If we wanted to review the pay categories or the deduction categories, we'll just use salary sacrifice as an example because it is something that we do see quite often where this is incorrectly classified. You can see here I've got a pre-tax deduction set up here and the classification is default. So this needs to be either salary sacrifice or super. We do have system default categories though. So we do have salary sacrifice set up as pre-tax deduction, which is classified correctly as salary sacrifice super, and it is also a reportable employer super contribution. So we do have quite a few system default categories that will stop this issue from happening. So we recommend if they fit into this category to use the system defaults, because then you know everything's going to be classified correctly. So I might let's just have a look and see what other questions we can answer.
We've just got one there at the moment. So just a reminder, everyone, please feel free to send your questions in to us so we can answer. So the one we've got, Beck, says, do we need to send the fourth quarter superannuation payments into like last year?
So with the April to June super quarter, we can't give you specific advice on when to lodge, but what I can say is that if you would like for your June quarter to be processed along with this financial year, the funds will have to hit the employees super fund by the 30th of June. So you will have to have paid prior to that. So your example of the 15th of June is probably about right in terms of processing time for you to lodge the super, the amounts to be paid, and then those funds to be distributed into the employees' nominated super fund. If you're wanting to make sure that all of those figures are included in your end of financial year data for this financial year. What I would recommend is if you're not sure on when you should lodge, or if you need to make sure that those figures are included in this financial year, I would double check with your financial advisor or speak to an accountant, and they'll be able to tell you exactly what is best for your business. But yes, if you're wanting it to be included in this financial year, it will need to be paid early. Excellent. Do we have a result from our poll, Brigid?
Yes, sorry, stuck myself on mute there. So 70% of our attendees today aren't actually using Employment Hero at all. So they're here to find out more about our services and things like that.
Fantastic. Well, welcome and thank you so much for joining us. With that, so if you have any questions about what functions and what features we do have, if you're trying to make a decision about whether or not to switch to Employment Hero Payroll, definitely let us know in the Q&A box, and we can answer those questions as well. Excellent question. So we've got one here that says, what if there were some timesheets not processed that relates to last year and STP has been finalized? So we have the option in Employment Hero Payroll. Actually, I think most payroll platforms should have this option, but you can process what's called an amended finalization event. So even if you have finalized all of your figures for the year, what will happen is you can go into the system after a finalization event has been lodged successfully. A new option or a new setting will appear that will say create amended finalization event, and then you can go ahead and update either just that one employee whose timesheets weren't included, or you can update all of the employees if you need to. So the process would be, once you've realized that there is a discrepancy, as soon as you've realized that there's a discrepancy, we recommend trying to work as quickly as possible. Go ahead and create the pay run to process the timesheets, to make whatever changes you need to do. And then you won't be able to lodge that pay event from that pay run because STP has been finalized, but that's perfectly fine. You can just finalize the pay run, jump into the STP reports and create and lodge the amended finalization event. Just if you do need to create an amendment or an amended finalization event, just keep in mind, if you do have reportable fringe benefit tax amounts, that you will have to re-enter those because they're not stored anywhere in the system. They're just sent through with the event. Excellent. We've had some really good questions. Keep them coming, guys. If you've got any questions about functionality or anything that you're unsure of, then definitely let us know. Unfortunately, we can't give you specific information if you're using another payroll platform at this point in time, but we can definitely let you know what we can help with.
Got another one here, Beck. So if you have no variance on updates of update events, is there any reason to lodge the event?
Yes, we still recommend lodging the event, just because it will give the ATO one last final refresh of your year-to-date data. But also, if you do have any previously terminated employees where you need to report fringe benefit tax amounts, the only place to do that during this end of financial year process is in that update event. So if you don't have any terminated employees and you don't have to report fringe benefit tax amounts for them, then no, you don't really necessarily have to worry. But we do recommend lodging it anyway, just so that everything's definitely refreshed. All the information that the ATO has is up to date, and then you can move on with your finalization event. The short answer is that it doesn't cause any harm, so there's no problem if you do lodge it. I'm just going to have a quick look through.
Sorry, we just got another one that just came in, which is, can you link the long service leave to the New South Wales long service portal?
That is a great question, and I'm going to be honest, and I don't know the answer to that. Aaron, do you have any more context to your question and what you mean by linking it? Sorry, I'll give you a second to type if you've got any more context for me. Are you referring to linking the leave category type or the reporting of the long service leave? We'll just see if
he responds.
Yeah, that's okay. We'll see if Aaron gives us a little bit more context, and then I can answer that one.
We did actually have a question earlier in the session, just while I wait for Aaron to come through, which is if you're not using Employment Hero Payroll, but you're using Employment Hero HR, does the super automatically update? And the answer to that is no, the HR system doesn't automatically update that super field that's available on your salaried staff. However, you can export out your employee data from Employment Hero HR and then update the superannuation field in bulk and then re-import that into your HR platform so that it is done in a bulk action. So while the HR system doesn't at this stage automatically update that field for you, there is a way that you can do that simply and in bulk to make that quick.
Thanks, Brigid. Is there anything else in the HR platform that would be good to call out or potentially display for those customers that we have that are using HR only or potentially both platforms? Is there anything else that you would call out to review?
Look, the biggest one, particularly if you're not connected, obviously, to our payroll platform, would be importing out. So in our HR platform, you go to your people on that left-hand navigation menu, you select import employees, you would then select the relevant file. So we've got one for updating employee pay details 0 and MyOb, for instance. You include your existing user information and you download. And that's then how you can actually just cross-check that in a spreadsheet, should you wish to. And like I said, just updating that superannuation field to make sure that it does update.
Beautiful, thank you. That actually does bring me to another point. When we discussed reviewing your employee data and your employee details, if you are using Employment Hero HR and another payroll platform, or even using Employment Hero Payroll, the way that the system works is you can run a report in your payroll platform to review all of the details that you need. But any changes that are made, if you're using Employment Hero HR and a linked payroll platform, need to be made in the HR platform. So you can run the review in the payroll platform, but then make any changes that you need to make in HR. And then those changes will sync and push across to the payroll platform. So that's just something to keep in mind as well. Sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just going to read out the one from Louise, which said, what would the last applicable pay run in the financial year be if the normal pay run dates split over June, July?
Excellent question. And the answer is it depends. So it depends on what the paid date is for that pay run. So if you've got a pay period that runs across June, July, and it is being paid in July, then it falls into next financial year and won't be included with the finalization event. If you are processing a pay run, let's say for like the last week of June and the first week of July, but you're paying it in June, so before the 30th of June, and the paid date is before the 30th of June, then it will fall into this current this current financial year and will be finalized with the 22-23 data.
Sorry, I was on mute and talking, as always. We've got one from Mark, which was, could you please elaborate regarding incorrect employee residential addresses causing finalisation issues?
Yes, of course. This is very specific to Employment Hero Payroll, and you would potentially need to check with your payroll software provider if you're using a different software. Purely and simply because the reason why we mention it in regards to Employment Hero Payroll is if the residential address is invalid and it doesn't pass validation checks through the Australia Post Validation, the portal, it'll give you an error, a validation error, and you won't be able to lodge the event. So that's purely and simply the reason why we recommend checking it. If your payroll platform doesn't cause an error and there's no issues with you lodging without the residential address being correct, then go ahead, that's fine.
Aaron's gotten back to us saying that, so what it sounds like is he's got employees who are casual employment, they're a labour hire company. There's a similar thing actually in Queensland, Beck, where you've actually got to upload, like for cleaners and things, you've got to actually upload long service leave into a portal. So it sounds like a similar situation there.
Yeah. Yeah, so thank you so much for giving us the context. That really helps. Unfortunately, the answer at this stage is no. It is still a manual process. We don't currently have a way to like electronically lodge those reports. I mean, you never know, that might change. We weren't previously able to electronically lodge things like child support deductions or garnishes, and that's now being done as a part of STP phase 2. So keep an eye out. Maybe that will change in the future, but at this stage, no, it's still a manual process.
Got another scenario specific one. So got a customer who uses both Employment Hero HR and Payroll. They have 6 employing entities. They've had some employees that have moved from one entity to another during the financial year, but they didn't tick it as final in the previous employing entity. Is there anything that they need to do with the finalisation event?
No, so the good thing with the way that the system picks up the data is when you go to create the finalization event in Employment Hero Payroll, because the details are picked up and filtered by pay schedule, all of the rest of the information is already included. So within that pay schedule, if your employee is linked to multiple employing entities, or if your employee has changed from, let's say, a closely held payee to a salary and wages, or from working holiday maker to salary and wages, or whatever it might be, if there are any changes, the finalization event will actually cover all of that data for you. So when you create it, what you'll see for those employees is one line item with the employing entity and the year-to-date data for that entity specifically, and then a separate line item with the separate entity ABN details and a separate amount of year-to-date data. So the total that's reported will be split across those 2 entities. I think we did have another question earlier about employing entities and whether you have to lodge them separately, and the answer is no. So again, if you're using another software, I can't speak for anyone else but Employment Hero, you will need to double check with your payroll software, but the within our system, it will lodge all of it at the same time, just with those separate line items. So you can rest easy. You don't have to worry about doing multiple events.
We've got another one following up on the residential address question. So does valid residential address mean it needs to be matched with the ATO record, or it just needs to be valid?
Just valid. So it doesn't have to match the ATO record. It just needs to be a valid address as per the Australia Post tracking system, or I'm not sure what the terminology they use is called, but the system has those validation checks inbuilt. So when you go, let's say you wanted to type in a fake address, and if that address didn't actually exist in Australia, it wouldn't work. So you just need to make sure that that's correct.
Excellent. Look, we have a few more minutes left, so if anyone has any last questions for us, please throw them in there so that Beck and I are able to answer them. If you don't have any further questions for us, we'd just like to thank you all for attending. You can, if you are a current customer with us and need further support, please make sure that you reach out to our support team. And a reminder that support is actually now available within platform, and that you interact with the bot. And should the bot not be able to help you, then you actually can lodge a ticket straight from within your platform. The advantage for us when you do this is it actually links to your platform and we know who you are instantly. So it does actually help us to get back to you faster. If you're someone who's considering Employment Hero and you'd like to reach out to our team, you can do that via employmenthero.com. We do have one last question that's come through, Beck, if you want to answer this one, which is, it's still on that residential address. So why do you need to have a residential address in the employee data and not a PO box?
It's just currently how the system is set up. We don't allow for PO boxes, just with those validation checks that happen in the background. So at this stage, it's just a residential address. Of course, we're completely open to feedback. So if that's something that is causing an issue for you or for your employees, then absolutely we will take on board that feedback and we can let our product team know and potentially update that in the future. Beautiful.
So look, Beck and I will be on here up until 12 p.m. But if you don't have any more questions for us, please feel free to leave the session if you'd like to. And thank you guys so much for attending today.
Thanks, everyone.
Another question is an update event you see terminate in an update event. Sorry, oh my goodness. You see terminated employees. Is this correct? Why is this?
Yes, absolutely, it is correct. The update event gives you an update of the full year-to-date data, and it will just refresh everything as of the point in time that you are submitting the update. So the terminated employees are still included just so that you can reconcile and view all of your employee data. You can also see like your ETP data and things like that. It is absolutely correct that that's the case. It is, as I've said, the only place where you can add reportable fringe benefits for a previously terminated employee. So that's why we also display them. So you have the functionality to report those figures if you wish. So yeah, absolutely perfectly fine. What will happen though is when you run the update event, you should see the difference between your active employees will say, well, in the is final column, they'll be unticked, but your terminated employees will be ticked as is final. So that's perfectly fine. We've just had a question saying, can you send us a recording of the session for further reference? And absolutely, we'll be doing that. So for those of you who may not have heard us at the start of the session, we will be sending through a copy of the recording, and we'll also be sending through a handout which links you to the end of financial year hub and a plethora of resources to help you with the end of financial year process.
Alrighty, well, if we don't have any more questions, we might look to close down the session. Once again, guys, thank you so much for taking the time and attending today and asking us questions and coming to learn.
Thanks so much, everyone. Have a great day.
Thank you, guys. Have a great one.